breaking up lasting 10 hours. After the jury had been out for 6.5 hours, they came back and asked for further guidance. And in fact, they were out for a very long period, and finally a verdict of guilty was brought in. Now, many people at the time were very disturbed, and a large number of members of Parliament urged the Home Secretary to recommend clemency. This was Mr. R.A. Butler. But he refused to do so, and in February of 1962, James Hanratty was hung.
Perhaps you could tell us a little about Jimmy, what sort of a person he was, what sort of a life he led.
Well, up until he was 15 years of age, he led a nice, normal life like any of the other sons. And from 15, 16, 17, he was in touch with France. He got in touch with France up in London, and from there he got into some very bad habits of housebreaking, and, you know, he was on the fiddle all the time with France. But in the course of different periods, he'd come home and then go away again. But any time he'd done anything wrong, he never done it at home. He always went to London to do it.
He went to prison a few times, didn't he? How many times did he go to prison?
He went to prison, I believe it was 3 times, for car thieving.
All the time it was for stealing cars?
Stealing cars, yes.
There was no question of violent crime?
No violence whatsoever, no.
Sex crimes, anything like
No
that?
sex crimes. He had some nice girls around here when he lived at home. He had several girlfriends and never had any complaints of violence or sex or in any way.
We are quite confident, absolutely certain, in fact, that he was innocent. We are quite certain that he was, in fact, on the night of the murder at Rill, 200 miles away. We are quite certain that Peter Louis Alphonse, who has already confessed on French television to a crime, was in fact the killer. And we are confident that we know a great deal about the crime. What our committee is seeking to do, ladies and gentlemen, is to have a full public inquiry so that the whole of the case can be gone over and Hanratty's name can be cleared.
On October the 14th, 1961, there was an identification parade of 13 men at Stoke Mandeville Hospital. From this identification parade, James Hanratty was picked out as the murderer by Valerie Story, the only witness to the crime. The previous day, he'd been picked out by 2 other witnesses. One was John Skillett, a foreman, who said he had spotted the murderer driving a car alongside his own the morning after the murder. And James Trower, an engineering worker, who said he had seen the murder car that same morning and had glimpsed the face of the driver as it passed him.
Miss Story got my greatest sympathy, because it must have been a terrible ordeal for the girl. But if I was on the Bedford jury, not Mr. Hanratty, I don't think I could look at her identification at all. But previously, she picked out another man.
And there they were, the 13 people, standing round Valerie Story's bed, including Alphonse, the man the police thought had done the murder. And Valerie Story looks at them, and 5 minutes later she says, there's the fellow who did the murder. Number 4. That's the bloke. Well, we've been trying for a long, long time to find out who this fellow is. We don't know who he is. There's a rumor that he's a Spanish sailor. Lucky for him that he's a Spanish sailor. Because if he wasn't a Spanish sailor, and if he hadn't got an alibi, if he couldn't remember where he was a month ago, he'd probably have been charged for the murder. He probably would have been hung. Because after all, Valerie Story was on Dead Man's Hill. She knew who was the murderer.
Now, to me, she couldn't have been so sure when she first picked out that other man.
Yes, so her identification really is vitiated to some extent by the fact that she picked out somebody completely different.
Yes, and when
about a month beforehand.
Yeah, and when she picked out my son, after 20 minutes, he was asked to speak, to sound his THs.
Aycott said, ask them to speak.
Superintendent Aycott was in charge of the case.
Repeat, be quiet, will you? I'm
thinking. And the one who says thinking, that's him. Well, Hanratty was the only Cockney on the parade, and he said thinking. The girl pointed to Hanratty, and Aycock gripped her arm and said, "Well done, Valerie." Now, that should have never happened. He should not have been there whatsoever.
When you look at the evidence with which he was convicted, it's fantastic. Fellow driving along a road, he comes down the road early in the morning. He sees a man go out into the road, and he comes up to him, opposite him, and he stops, and he winds down his window. The passenger in his car winds down his window to shout abuse at the fellow there for coming out in the road. And he shouts the abuse, gets out of his chair, sees the fellow turn round and laugh. 3 seconds, possibly 5, boom, they're away. Now, there's 2 blokes in the car. One man sitting there, he goes up on the identification parade, Hanratty. He was the man in the car. The other fellow says, definitely wasn't Hanratty. So that's what other identification. Another fellow going to work, bit of a flyboy, fellow called John Lennon down in the East End. He's easy with the police, likes to keep in with the police, that kind of thing. He goes down and he's walking up to knock on a fellow's door to get him to take him to work. He's knocking on the fellow's door, this is his story. He looks round, a car shoots by at 30 miles an hour. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to identify a driver of a car going past you at 30 miles an hour at 7 o'clock in the morning. If you've tried it, but it's extremely difficult. I've tried it, actually. I've stood for hours trying to remember a single feature of any driver I've seen going past at 30 miles an hour at 7 o'clock in the morning. I haven't tried it at 7 o'clock in the morning, but I've tried it at other times. And I tell you, it's absolutely impossible. You don't see a single thing. Now, this fellow picked out Hanratty. Oh, definitely, no question at all. Hanratty was driving the car. That's the kind of evidence he was convicted on. Absolutely fantastic.
When Hanratty read the newspaper reports that Superintendent Aycock wanted him for the A6 murder, he also knew that he was being sought for housebreaking offences in the Ruislip area.
And he knew if he gave himself up, he was going to get 3 years. So his only way was to keep ringing up Mr. Aycock, which he did several times a day, and trying to clear himself of the charge which Mr. Aycock or wanted him for. So
James Hanratty's brother, Michael,
he made it plain that he wasn't going to give himself up for this because of these housebreaking. And he said it's ridiculous, this charge, I had nothing to do with this A6 business. I know nothing about it at all.
When first arrested for the murder, Hanratty told police that he had spent the afternoon before the murder in Liverpool trying to sell stolen jewellery and had spent the night with 3 fences.
And they said, oh, yes, what did you do? He said, I got out of Liverpool Station. I was going to sell some stolen jewellery. And I got out at Liverpool Station, and I put my case in the left luggage office, and I went and had a cup of tea. Then I wandered around looking for Tarleton or Talbot Road, where a previous prisoner friend of Hanratty was believed to live. And he was asking people in the street, can you tell me where Tarleton or Talbot Road is? And all the rest. This is his story. Gets in a bus, he goes up to Scotland Road. And he gets some of the way up to Scotland Road, and he asks the conductor, I want to get off at Tarleton Road. The conductor says, I never heard of it, get off here. So he gets off, and he walks across the road, and he goes into a sweet shop. And he says to the woman, he sees there's an old lady behind the counter, and there's a little girl in the shop. And he says to the old lady, can you tell me where Tarleton or Talbot Road is? I'm not sure whether it's Tarleton or Talbot Road. And she says, well, I'm afraid I can't help you. And she asks, and she thinks a bit about it, and then she says, no, I'm awfully sorry, I can't help you. So the fellow says, thank you very much, and he goes out.
So he made up his mind to convince Mr. Aycock, I'll just tell him about the sweet shop and other people he met in Liverpool, and forget about the other side. So he only kept to the first part of the alibi.
It wasn't until he told the defence that he'd gone into the Scotland Road that the thing was investigated at all. And the police say, well, that'd be ridiculous. He was doing the murder. He couldn't have possibly... However, we'll carry out the inquiries. So the police go and make the inquiries. And the police go up the Scotland Road into the sweet shops. And they ask all the people in the sweet shops, I don't suppose you've ever seen this fellow. He said he was coming on Tarleton Road. They come to a shop called Cowley's. And there's a man there. He says, well, as a matter of fact, I wasn't here on that day. My mother-in-law was looking after the shop at the time. Perhaps you better go and see her. So they go and find the mother-in-law, who's a very respectable lady. called Mrs. Dinwoodie. And she says, you know, it's an extraordinary thing, but a young man did come in here and ask the way to Tarleton or Talbot Road. So this really sets the police back. They did. Well, because it couldn't have been the right day. It must have been some other time. He was thinking some other time. No, she said, as a matter of fact, I was only in that shop for 2 days, the 21st and the 22nd of August. So then the police get to work. And the police, I don't know how it happens, but at any rate, she ends up by saying that it was on the 21st that Hanratty went into this sweet shop. So the prosecution then come and say, when the defense say, but he was in Liverpool, he was in the sweet shop, they say, oh, no, that was the Monday, the 21st. The Tuesday, the night of the murder, of course, he wasn't in that sweet shop at all. But the difficulty was that there were 8, no less, 8 people came to the trial to say that on the Monday, Hanratty was in London. On the Monday, Hanratty was in London. Mr. and Mrs. France and their daughter, Carol France, and the dentist, Carol France's dentist, who said that she'd had her tooth out, and Carol France remembered the day because of the tooth. You don't know who these names are, but I'm telling you that there are 8 people who will swore in court and whose evidence was not challenged in any way by the prosecution to say that Hanratty, throughout the Monday, when he was meant to be in Liverpool, asking the way to Tarleton and Talbot Road, was in London. So he was in London on the Monday. Plainly, he was in London on the Monday. And if he was in London on the Monday, it must have been on the Tuesday that he went into Mrs. Dinwoodie's shop and asked the way to Tarleton or Talbot Road. They gave Mrs. Dinwoodie a photograph of Hanratty. They said, is this the man? They said, she said, certainly, that's the man. And she signed on the back, this is the man who came into my shop. The little girl, Barbara Ford, there, they said, do you think that's the man? She says, yes, that's the man. Signed on the back, Barbara Ford, the little girl, says, that's the man that came into the shop. And it must have been the Tuesday. And if it was the Tuesday, and if he was in Liverpool in the sweet shop on the Tuesday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he couldn't have walked into the car at a cornfield and Slough, Bucks, at 9:30. Couldn't have done, as a matter of fact. The prosecution started to talk about helicopters. No, seriously, you know. In the hearing at Ampthill, they said, well, could he have got a plane? Could we have the plane times? You know, plane times didn't come out at all. There wasn't a plane that could get him there. And, you know, he's believed not to fly, although he had many remarkable qualities. Hanratty couldn't fly there. And therefore, he was in Liverpool at the time. So the fact of the matter is that he was in Liverpool.
The 3 fences in Liverpool, whom Hanratty had first mentioned in his police alibi, were never found. Then, on the 6th day of the trial, Hanratty suddenly told his lawyers that he had, in fact, on the evening of the murder, travelled from Liverpool to Rhyl, where he had spent the night in a boarding house after looking round for lodgings.
He felt, I think it was the second week of the trial, that things wasn't going as he thought it would have gone. And Mr. Sherrod, as Hanratty's counsel, told him that he was going to put him in the box. And my son told Mr. Sherrod, well, he said, Mr. Sherrod, if I'm going in the box, I've got to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I went to Liverpool, I went from Liverpool to Rhyl, and I stayed at this house in Rhyl with Mrs. Jones. Of course, I didn't know her name at that time. Neither did he.
Jimmy said he'd gone to Rhyl for what reason?
Well, he had some jewellery, and according to what Jimmy told me, that the chap in Rhyl that he went to see met him in prison, and he told Jimmy that if ever he wanted to get rid of any gear, that he could always get him a buyer for it and get him a proper price.
And this man was found, this man in Rhyl. He was proved to exist.
He did, yes. Yeah. Mr. Terry Evans.
We went to Rhyl, and we found 12 good witnesses there. It's really concrete. Said that Jimmy was there on the night of the 22nd of August. There was people in the fairground that seen him. There was a paper seller seen him. There was 4 houses that had been to, and the lady put him up. Now, this lady was the only witness that was brought to Bedford's side.
There's 4 witnesses stands out that made statements before Hanratty's execution, and there's 8 more that made statements to me and Lord Russell after the trial that Jimmy was in Rhyl. And those people told me themselves, beyond all doubt in their minds, that he was there.
And all of them, I think,